Look, the flight attendant's voice cut through the quiet hum of the first-class cabin. She has drugs in her bag. She held up a small package like a prosecutor brandishing evidence, her finger pointed squarely at the only black woman on the plane. This passenger, she declared, her voice ringing with false authority, brought illegal substances onto this aircraft. The humiliation was instant, the accusation absolute. A sea of smartphones rose, lenses glinting, capturing the scene that would soon explode across the internet as the most viewed flight incident of the year. Moments later, as airport security escorted the elegant black woman down the aisle, she paused, leaned in close to the smirking flight attendant, and her voice, a low and chilling whisper, promised a reckoning. "You have no idea what you've just done." The flight attendant couldn't have known she'd just framed a top CIA operative. She couldn't have known that her career, her freedom, and her carefully constructed life were all about to burn to the ground. If you have ever felt the sting of a false accusation, or watched helplessly as someone was judged by the color of their skin, then you will want to hear every minute of this shocking story. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from if you believe justice must prevail, because what happens next is something you absolutely need to see. 12 hours before that fateful confrontation, Crystal Cole was engaged in a ritual honed over 15 years at the CIA, meticulous mission preparation. At 38, Crystal was a testament to shattered ceilings, a woman, a person of color, who had risen through the ranks of an institution built by and for the old guard. She wasn't just an agent. She was the newly appointed head of the CIA's Covert Aviation Security Division, handpicked by Director Reynolds himself after her unprecedented success in an Eastern European counterterrorism operation that saved thousands of lives, but never made the news. As she packed her carry-on in her hotel room, her secure phone lit up. It was Director Reynolds. "The airline CEO has been briefed on your cover," he said, his voice crisp. "No one else knows. To the flight crew, you are just another passenger. Your true mission, to identify the smuggling ring we've tracked to this airline, remains classified at the highest level." But what truly set Crystal apart wasn't just her analytical mind or her flawless service record. It was an innate gift, an almost preternatural awareness of the world around her. Throughout her career, she had demonstrated a chilling ability to see what others missed, to sense a threat before it could materialize. As she glided through the bustling terminal that morning, her mind was a silent, relentless processor of information. Without breaking stride, she caught a tumbling toddler whose mother had glanced away for a mere second. She noted the expired security badge on a maintenance worker, the hushed exchange between two TSA agents who should have been watching the scanner. Each observation was silently logged into her specialized phone app, a program disguised as a social media feed, but linked directly to a secure CIA database. Crystal's primary mission was to observe the flight crew and identify who was using commercial aircraft to move high-value drugs across state lines. And one name on her briefing had been circled in red: Megan Parker. While Crystal was assessing security vulnerabilities, flight attendant Megan Parker rushed through the employee entrance, flashing a practiced smile at the guard who noted she was late again. To the world, 32-year-old Megan was the picture of success, a designer watch on her wrist, a flawless manicure, and blonde highlights that cost more than a car payment. But beneath the polished veneer was a woman drowning in debt, her bitterness a poison she sipped daily, resentful of a world she felt was leaving her behind. "First class isn't what it used to be," she muttered to her colleague Tyler, scanning the passenger manifest. "They let just anyone with money up here these days." Tyler's nervous laugh did little to hide his discomfort at her thinly veiled racism. It wasn't the first time. The turning point had been when Alyssa Johnson, a black colleague with less seniority but higher customer satisfaction ratings, secured the senior purser position Megan had coveted. "It's all about quotas now," she'd complained to anyone who would listen. "They just want diversity hires." What no one knew was that Megan's resentment had curdled into something far more dangerous. 6 months ago, desperate to maintain her facade of success, she'd accepted an offer from a passenger. The deal was simple: use her crew credentials to move packages past security. The money was too good to refuse. Now, hiding in an airport restroom stall, Megan whispered into her phone, "I told you, I'll make the drop this trip. The package is secure. No, I'm not backing out. Do you know how much debt I'm in?" She glanced around nervously before opening her makeup bag. Nestled among the cosmetics was a small, vacuum-sealed package of high-grade pharmaceuticals destined for the black market. It was worth thousands on the street, enough to keep her creditors at bay for another month. As Megan rejoined her crew, her professional mask firmly in place, she had no idea that today's flight would bring her face to face with an operative trained to see through every lie, every deception, every carefully constructed facade. As Crystal Cole settled into her first-class seat, Megan Parker readied the cabin for boarding. Crystal's trained eyes cataloged the microaggressions, the subtle shifts in Megan's demeanor. There was the warm, attentive service for the white male CEO, the friendly chatter with the elderly white couple, and then the cool, perfunctory acknowledgement as she reached Crystal's seat. "Anything to drink?" The question was clipped, the customary ma'am conspicuously absent. "Sparkling water, please," Crystal replied, her tone neutral, betraying nothing of her internal analysis. When Megan practically dropped the drink on her tray, a stark contrast to the care she'd taken with others, Crystal made a mental note. Discrimination often hid in these small, dismissive moments. But unlike other passengers, she was here to document it and connect it to a far greater crime. Megan felt Crystal's gaze on her, a steady, analytical pressure that made her skin crawl. "That black woman in 3A, she whispered to Tyler during pre-flight checks. "She doesn't belong up here. She's the only one." Tyler just shook his head and walked away. As the flight progressed, so did Megan's paranoia. She had to protect her operation. A dangerous idea began to crystallize in her mind, a plan that would not only neutralize the perceived threat, but also validate the ugly stereotypes she harbored. High above the clouds, the injustice Crystal was experiencing was about to escalate into a full-blown nightmare. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Crystal appeared to be working on her tablet, but she was observing everything. Her trained eyes missed nothing. She pressed the call button. 1 minute passed, then 5. She watched as Megan walked past her aisle repeatedly, tending to other passengers while pointedly ignoring Crystal's illuminated light. A white man in seat 2C pressed his button. Megan was at his side in seconds, beaming. "What can I get for you, sir?" "A scotch, neat, when you have a moment." "Absolutely. I'll bring that right over." The disparity was blatant. When Crystal finally caught Megan's eye on her third pass, the flight attendant's tone was frigid. "Did you need something?" Again, the missing "ma'am." "I requested a blanket. It's quite cold. We have a limited supply. I'll see if any are left." 20 minutes later, no blanket had arrived. Crystal calmly documented the exchange on her phone. This was more than poor service. It was a pattern of deliberate neglect and potentially a clue. Meanwhile, Megan's anxiety was mounting. The small package hidden in her crew bag felt like a burning coal. The plan was to leave it in the first-class lavatory for another passenger to retrieve. Simple. But Crystal saw the signs. She saw Megan's trembling hands as she served drinks. She saw the compulsive glances toward her crew bag. She overheard the hushed conversations with Tyler that ceased the moment anyone approached. These were the hallmarks of a criminal under pressure. During a lull in the service, Crystal watched Megan take her crew bag into the first-class lavatory. She emerged 2 minutes later without it, only to return momentarily to retrieve it. The bag was visibly less full. Crystal knew what she had just witnessed, a dead drop. Minutes later, a well-dressed man used the same lavatory. When he returned to his seat, the bulge in his jacket pocket was unmistakable. The transaction was complete. Executed in plain sight. Crystal had seen enough. Her suspicions were confirmed. Megan wasn't just prejudiced. She was a drug courier. What Crystal didn't know was how far Megan would go to protect herself when she felt cornered. This is why you need to hit that subscribe button right now. What happened next will leave you speechless. During a quiet period in the flight, Megan slipped into the galley. With shaking hands, she reached into her personal locker and retrieved a second drug packet from a hidden compartment in her makeup bag. This was her payment, a small supply her contact allowed her to keep. It was worth a small fortune on the street, but today, she had a different use for it. Looking around to ensure she was alone, she whispered, "Insurance policy," and tucked the package into her apron pocket. What Megan didn't know was that her every move was being silently documented by the microscopic lens concealed in Crystal's tie pin. CIA technology generations ahead of anything commercially available. As she prepared for the next cabin service, Megan made a decision that would seal her fate. She waited for Crystal to use the lavatory, then approached her empty seat. A quick scan of the cabin confirmed most passengers were distracted by movies or sleep. Perfect. Feigning to adjust the pillow and the very blanket she had earlier refused to provide, Megan's hand moved with practiced speed, slipping the small package into Crystal's open handbag. The trap was set. When Crystal returned, she found Megan fussing over her seat. The flight attendant's sudden helpfulness was a glaring red flag. "Just making sure you're comfortable," Megan said, her smile brittle. Crystal simply nodded, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. She sat down, subtly assessing her surroundings, but the plant was too well executed to be immediately obvious. The evidence, however, was already secure, captured by her hidden camera. Megan waited 20 minutes before making her move. She went to the galley and used the airphone to call the captain. "Sir, I believe a passenger in first class is in possession of illegal narcotics. I observed her acting suspiciously, and I think we need to inspect her belongings." Following protocol, the captain authorized a search with the air marshal's assistance. Megan marched back to Crystal's seat, flanked by another flight attendant and a man in plain clothes, the air marshal. She raised her voice, ensuring everyone in first class could hear. "Excuse me, I'm going to need to search your bag." Crystal looked up from her tablet, her expression a mask of calm. "May I ask why?" "We've received a report of illegal contraband on this flight," Megan announced. Passengers began to stir, their interest piqued. Phones emerged, ready to record. "I do not consent to a search of my personal property," Crystal stated, her voice even. "This isn't a request, ma'am," the air marshal interjected. "Under federal aviation regulations, we have the authority to search any passenger's belongings if there's a credible security threat." Without waiting for a response, Megan snatched Crystal's handbag. With a dramatic flair, she reached inside and pulled out the small package. "What is this?" she demanded, holding it aloft for all to see. A collective gasp went through the cabin. More phones were now recording. Crystal remained preternaturally calm. "That is not mine," she said firmly. "I have no idea how that got in my bag." "It was in your handbag," Megan retorted, her tone dripping with accusation. "Sir," she said to the air marshal, "this appears to be a controlled substance." The whispers grew louder. "Unbelievable," a woman across the aisle muttered. "And in first class." Another passenger added, "They think money lets them get away with anything." "Ma'am," the air marshal said, his tone now grave, "I'm going to have to ask you to come with me to the rear of the aircraft." Crystal maintained her composure. "I understand you have a protocol to follow, but I want the record to show that I did not place that item in my bag. It was planted." She looked directly at Megan, who flinched before steeling her expression into one of righteous indignation. "Are you accusing a crew member?" Megan asked, playing to her audience. "That's absurd." "Ma'am, please," the air marshal insisted. "Come with me now. We will sort this out on the ground." As Crystal rose with quiet dignity, she leaned toward Megan. "You have no idea," she whispered, "what you've just done." Megan's smug satisfaction faltered for a second before returning. She had no idea she had just made the final, fatal mistake of her life. The marshal escorted Crystal down the aisle, past the accusing stares and whispers. "Can't believe they let people like that in first class. Good thing they caught her." Each comment was laced with a casual prejudice Crystal had faced her entire life, a poison that still seeped into the world no matter how high she rose. When the plane landed, airport security was waiting. As she was led off the aircraft, her back straight and head held high, the passengers continued to film. No one on that flight knew they weren't witnessing a criminal being apprehended, but the opening act of an operation that would bring a multi-million-dollar smuggling ring to its knees. In the terminal, Megan was already a hero, showing her video to other crew members and soaking in their praise. Within an hour, she had uploaded an edited version to social media. The caption read, "Brave flight attendant catches drug smuggler in first class. Watch what happens." The video would indeed go viral, but not in the way she imagined. Crystal was marched through the airport, a spectacle for the passengers who followed, phones still recording her public humiliation. Once inside a sterile security office, she finally broke her silence. "I need to make a phone call," she said, her voice calm but layered with an authority that gave the officers pause. "Ma'am, we'll process you first, then you can call this number, now." Crystal slid a plain black card across the desk. It bore only a government seal and a phone number. The officer hesitated, then dialed. As he identified himself and stated that he had a Crystal Cole in custody, his entire demeanor transformed. His back straightened, his eyes widened. "Yes, sir, right away, sir, of course, sir." The atmosphere in the room didn't just change, it inverted. The handcuffs were removed with frantic apologies. "Ma'am, we had no idea." "Ma'am, we are so sorry for the inconvenience." Crystal accepted their apologies with a curt nod. "I need a secure line to Langley, and I need all airport security footage from the last 3 hours." The officers scrambled to comply. Meanwhile, Megan's video was a sensation. It racked up hundreds of thousands of views, the comment section a cesspool of racist assumptions. "Great job catching her." Why am I not surprised who the dealer was? Megan was being celebrated as a hero by a mob that knew nothing of the truth. What they didn't know was that the woman they were vilifying wasn't just innocent. She was one of the most effective operatives in the United States government. And she had recorded everything. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Things are about to get intense, and you will not want to miss a single second. While Megan's doctored video continued its viral spread, Crystal Cole was striding through the corridors of CIA headquarters. She moved through checkpoints that few even knew existed, her badge granting her access to the agency's inner sanctum. In a secure briefing room, Director Reynolds waited with 2 senior analysts. "I take it the mission did not go as planned," he said grimly. "Actually, sir," Crystal replied, removing the tie pin from her jacket and plugging it into the room's central computer. "It went perfectly. We found our leak." On the massive wall screen, a crystal-clear, high-definition video began to play. The angle was perfect. It captured the precise moment flight attendant Megan Parker adjusted her position, waited for the passenger to visit the washroom, and then deftly planted the small packet in the seat pocket. This flight attendant, Megan Parker, didn't just racially profile me and make a false accusation, Crystal explained, her voice steady as the video played in the briefing room. She's involved in something far more insidious. The footage continued, shifting to a view of the galley. Megan, believing she was unobserved, passed a similar small package to another crew member. The handoff was swift, a blink and you'll miss it exchange that was nevertheless unmistakable to a trained eye. "Drug smuggling," Director Reynolds stated, his voice a low growl. "Exactly," Crystal confirmed. "Given the size and handling, I'd wager it's high-value prescription drugs or cocaine, small enough to go unnoticed, but valuable enough to make the risk worthwhile." Analysts were already running facial recognition on the second crew member, his employee file flashing onto a nearby screen. "Tyler Jenkins," one of them announced. 5 years with the airline. Clean record." "A clean record that we know of," Crystal corrected. "I've seen this pattern before. They use racial profiling as a shield. They target a passenger of color, assuming law enforcement will be predisposed to believe the accusation. If the passenger gets suspicious or catches on, they plant evidence to create a chaotic distraction." "Clever," Reynolds admitted, leaning back in his chair. "Weaponizing racism to cover a criminal enterprise." "It's more than clever, it's brutally effective," Crystal said. "My preliminary research shows Megan Parker has been at the center of at least 7 similar incidents in the last year alone, all involving passengers of color. In every case, the passenger was removed from the flight or detained. No charges ever stuck, but the damage, the humiliation and disruption, was done." Another analyst looked up. "Director, the CEO of the airline has been trying to reach you. He's personally requesting a meeting to apologize to Agent Cole for the incident." Crystal nodded slowly. "Good. That gives us an entry point. We can bring the airline into the investigation without tipping off our suspects." Director Reynolds studied the frozen image of the handoff on the screen. "The question is, how deep does this go? Is it just these two, or are we looking at a larger network using commercial flights for distribution?" "That's what we have to find out," Crystal said, her gaze fixed and determined. "And we need to do it before they realize the person they tried to frame is a federal agent." The director met her gaze. "How do you want to proceed?" A faint, sharp smile touched Crystal's lips. "I think it's time for Ms. Parker to meet her new boss." While Megan Parker was basking in the glow of her newfound internet fame, she was blissfully unaware that her viral moment was rapidly becoming Exhibit A in a federal investigation. Her smug, self-satisfied smile was about to be permanently erased. In the executive boardroom of Greatland Airways, the atmosphere was thick with crisis. The video had exploded, hitting 5 million views and getting picked up by every major news outlet. "This is a public relations nightmare," the chief communications officer lamented, her thumb scrolling frantically through the torrent of negative comments on her tablet. "The racial angle is killing us. We're being branded as everything from enablers to outright racists." Richard Hamilton, the airline's distinguished gray-haired CEO, paced at the head of the long table. "What is our official understanding of what happened on that flight?" The crew report states a first-class passenger was found to be carrying illegal substances, the head of customer experience recited mechanically. Standard procedure was followed. The air marshal was notified, the passenger was detained during the stopover in Chicago, and local authorities assumed control. "And this passenger, do we have a name?" Hamilton demanded. "Crystal Cole," the CCO read from her notes. "Booked a first-class round trip D.C. to Los Angeles. The incident took place at the Chicago layover." "Have we reached out? Offered an apology? Compensation?" An uneasy silence settled over the room. "Actually, sir," the head of security finally interjected, "we've been trying. But we're hitting brick walls. Ms. Cole has effectively vanished from our system." "What do you mean, vanished?" Hamilton snapped. "I mean, when we attempt to access her contact information, we're met with a government clearance block. The phone number on her reservation was rerouted 3 times, and we eventually spoke to someone at what sounded like a federal agency. We were told Ms. Cole would contact us when she deemed it appropriate." Hamilton stopped pacing. The concern on his face curdled into alarm. "A federal agency? Which one?" "They declined to identify themselves, sir." "Are you telling me," Hamilton said, his voice dangerously low, "that we may have detained a federal agent?" The tension in the room ratcheted up, the implications dawning on everyone present. "It gets worse," the security head continued, his expression grim. "I pulled the raw security footage from the gate and the cabin to review it myself. The unedited video shows without a doubt that our flight attendant planted the drugs." A wave of shocked whispers swept through the room. "Show me," Hamilton commanded. The footage played on the large boardroom screen, displaying Megan's actions in undeniable high-definition clarity. The furtive retrieval of the packet, the deliberate placement in the seat pocket, the feigned discovery. "My God," Hamilton breathed, "and she works for us?" His private line rang, slicing through the tense silence. Hamilton answered, his expression shifting from serious to grave as he listened. "Yes, sir. I understand completely. Yes, we will offer our full cooperation. Absolutely. Thank you." When he hung up, the color had drained from his face. He looked at the stunned faces around the table. "That was the director of the Transportation Security Administration," he announced. "The passenger our employee falsely accused, framed, and publicly humiliated is Crystal Cole. She's a senior operative with the CIA, and she was in the middle of conducting a security assessment of our airline." The silence that followed was absolute. "Apparently," Hamilton went on, his voice hollow, "what began as a routine evaluation has just escalated into a full-scale federal investigation into a suspected drug smuggling ring operating within our flight crews." The head of legal affairs was the first to find her voice. What do they want from us?" "They are sending Agent Cole here tomorrow morning to brief us personally," Hamilton replied. "Until then, we proceed as normal. Issue the standard 'We are investigating' press release. And, most importantly, do not, under any circumstances, alert Flight Attendant Parker or any other crew members that they are under scrutiny." Just as the executives were processing this bombshell, the head of PR groaned, looking down at her phone. "You've got to be kidding me. Megan Parker is scheduled to be on a national morning show tomorrow. They're hailing her as a hero who stopped a drug trafficker." A hard, determined glint entered Hamilton's eyes. "Not for long," he said. "Schedule a company-wide all-hands meeting for all available flight crews tomorrow afternoon. The official reason will be to recognize Ms. Parker's heroic actions. Make sure she and anyone she's close with are in attendance." "Are we setting a trap?" the CCO asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "We aren't," Hamilton corrected her grimly. "Agent Cole is." The morning after her video went viral, Megan Parker walked into the crew entrance of Greatland Airways feeling like a superstar. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing. 10 million views overnight. "There she is!" The hero of Flight 237, a colleague shouted as she entered the crew lounge. A smattering of applause broke out. Someone even asked for a selfie. Megan soaked it all in, a wide, triumphant smile plastered on her face. This was what she deserved: recognition, respect. The fact that it was built on the humiliation of a black woman was a detail that never once troubled her conscience. The morning news wants an interview, Tyler said, sliding up next to her with a cup of coffee. I know, Megan purred, attempting a veneer of humility. I'm doing it live from the terminal at 11. Another flight attendant hurried over, phone in hand. Did you see the company-wide email? The CEO wants to meet with our entire crew this afternoon. Megan's eyes widened. The CEO? Richard Hamilton himself? It says they want to recognize the crew of Flight 237 for outstanding service and security awareness. The colleague read. Megan, this is it. You're getting a promotion. The thought of it, senior cabin crew, maybe even a management track, made Megan's heart race. This was her moment. Later, in the restroom mirror, she practiced her acceptance speech. I was just doing my job, she rehearsed, trying on different expressions of false modesty. Passenger safety is my top priority. What she didn't say, what she barely admitted even to herself, was how intoxicating it had felt to put that woman in her place. The memory of the shock and shame on her face was a satisfaction far greater than any promotion. As she applied another layer of lipstick, her phone buzzed with a text from her supplier. Saw the video, not smart, drawing too much attention. Meeting canceled this week. Megan frowned. Amateurs. This attention wasn't a liability. It was the perfect cover. Who would ever suspect a hero flight attendant of being a drug mule? She texted back, Relax, this is good for us. Call later. She had no way of knowing that at that very moment, her accomplice, Tyler, was being tailed by two plainclothes federal agents. She had no idea that her supplier's phone was now the subject of a federal wiretap. And she could not possibly imagine that the celebratory meeting she was so eagerly anticipating was, in fact, the end of her world. The large conference room at Greatland Airways headquarters was filled to capacity. The air buzzed with excited chatter. In the front row, Megan Parker sat with impeccable posture, her smile a carefully controlled mask of professionalism. Beside her, Tyler fidgeted, his eyes darting nervously towards the doors. Why are there so many security guards? He whispered. It's for the CEO, obviously, she hissed back. Stop being so paranoid. But these weren't the usual corporate security. These men and women stood with the coiled stillness and watchful eyes of federal agents. At precisely 2:00 p.m., a side door opened and Richard Hamilton entered, flanked by his executive team. Their expressions were somber, utterly out of place for a celebration. Good afternoon, Hamilton began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. Thank you for coming. As you all know, an incident occurred on Flight 237 yesterday which has gained significant national attention. Megan sat up a little straighter, ready for her name to be called. What you may not know, Hamilton's voice turned to steel, is that this incident has exposed a grave security breach within our airline. Today, I am introducing the new head of a joint task force between Greatland Airways and federal authorities, tasked with investigating criminal activity among our staff. Megan's smile faltered. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. Please welcome our new head of aviation security and integrity, Hamilton announced, turning to the side door. Special Agent Crystal Cole. The door opened, and Crystal walked in. She was transformed. The casual travel clothes were gone, replaced by a sharply tailored suit that radiated authority. Her CIA credentials were on a lanyard around her neck, hanging like a judgment. The color drained from Megan's face. Her mouth fell open, but no sound emerged. Beside her, Tyler made a move to stand, only to find his path blocked by an agent who seemed to have materialized from nowhere. A dead silence fell over the room as Crystal approached the podium. Her eyes met Megan's for a fleeting, devastating moment, a look that said everything. I told you this wasn't over. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, Crystal began, her voice clear and amplified by the microphone. For those of you who don't recognize me, I am Special Agent Crystal Cole, Central Intelligence Agency, Counter-Narcotics Division. A tidal wave of shock rippled through the audience. Yesterday, she continued, while conducting an undercover assessment of this airline's security protocols, I was falsely accused of drug possession. What the individual who framed me did not realize, however, was that our entire interaction was being recorded. Crystal nodded to a technician. The massive screen behind her flickered to life, playing the crystal-clear footage from her hidden camera. The room watched in stunned silence as Megan retrieved the drugs, planted them, and then orchestrated her fraudulent discovery. The video then cut to the galley, showing the swift, incriminating handoff to Tyler. Gasps echoed through the hall. Flight attendants turned to stare at Megan, whose face had gone from pale to ashen gray. "What you are witnessing," Crystal declared, her voice ringing with authority, "is not merely a case of racial profiling. You are seeing evidence of a drug trafficking operation that has been using this airline as its private distribution network, an operation that uses passengers of color as scapegoats when they feel exposed." Tyler shot to his feet. "She made me do it. Megan said we would never get caught. She said no one would believe—" "Shut up, Tyler," Megan hissed, grabbing his arm. Two federal agents moved toward their row. "Ms. Parker, Mr. Jenkins, please come with us." As the agents began to escort them out, Megan suddenly wrenched her arm free, her face a mask of rage. "This is ridiculous!" she shrieked, her composure shattering completely. "You can't just believe her because she's a Fed. Everyone saw my video. She had the drugs." Crystal remained calm at the podium. "Drugs that you planted, Ms. Parker. As the evidence proves. That evidence could be fake." Megan's voice grew shrill. "You people always stick together, don't you?" The ugly insinuation of "you people" hung in the air, making several employees flinch. Crystal stepped down from the podium and walked towards Megan, stopping a few feet away. Her voice was quiet, but carried through the silent room. "Ms. Parker, for 15 years I have served this country in ways you cannot possibly imagine. And while I have faced my share of prejudice, I have rarely encountered anyone who so brazenly weaponizes racism to conceal their own crimes." Megan's eyes darted around, searching for a single sympathetic face. She found none. "You targeted passengers based on the color of their skin," Crystal continued, "because you believed society's biases would be your shield. You saw a black woman in first class and made an assumption. You assumed I didn't belong." "That's not true," Megan stammered. "It wasn't about race." From the back of the room, another flight attendant, a black woman in her late 40s, stood up. "That's a lie, Megan," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "You've been making comments for years, questioning our passengers of color, trying to reseat them. We all heard you. We were just too afraid to say anything." Seeing it all fall apart, Tyler made one last desperate gamble. "It was her idea. She contacted the suppliers. She told me it was easy money." Megan lunged at him, screaming before the agents restrained her. "You're facing federal charges for drug trafficking, tampering with evidence, and civil rights violations," one of the agents informed her coolly. "I suggest you remain silent." As they led her away, she locked eyes with Crystal one last time. "You think you've won?" Megan spat. "People will still believe my version. They'll believe what they want to believe about people like you." A flicker of pity crossed Crystal's face. "And that, Ms. Parker, is why people like me have to keep showing up in places people like you don't think we belong. Because the truth, eventually, always comes out." The fight drained out of Megan as the cold reality of her situation crashed down upon her. The fame, the promotion, the respect, all of it vanished, replaced by the certainty of prison bars and public disgrace. As the doors closed behind them, Richard Hamilton returned to the podium. "What we have witnessed today is a profound failure," he said to the silent, shaken crowd. "But it is also an opportunity for profound change." The meeting that was meant to be a celebration of a lie had become the beginning of a reckoning. Looking out at the faces of the employees, Crystal knew that true justice wasn't just about catching criminals. It was about dismantling the systems that allowed them to thrive. In the days that followed, the real story went viral. The investigation expanded, ultimately uncovering a smuggling network that spanned 3 different airlines. At Greatland Airways, CEO Richard Hamilton, guided by Crystal, didn't just engage in damage control. He initiated a complete overhaul of company culture, implementing one of the most comprehensive anti-bias and ethics training programs in the industry. What began as an act of calculated racism on a single flight became the catalyst for a change that would be felt for years to come. In the wake of the scandal, the airline scrambled to contain the fallout. Security procedures were overhauled. A new passenger advocacy office was established, its sole purpose to investigate complaints of discriminatory treatment. In a quiet office overlooking the tarmac, Crystal sat across from Yasmin Collins, a black flight attendant with 12 years of service to the airline. Yasmin's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I wanted to thank you. What happened to you on that flight? It's happened to other passengers before. And when they complained, no one believed them." "Did it ever happen to you?" Crystal asked. Yasmin gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Not the drug accusations, but the rest of it. The different treatment, the assumptions, the way Megan and some of the others would talk about certain passengers. I tried to report it once, about 3 years ago. What happened? Nothing. They dismissed it. Without proof, they said, it was just my word against theirs. That's what made your footage so powerful. For the first time, there was undeniable proof. No one could look away." Crystal leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Would you be willing to help lead the new training program? The airline needs voices like yours. People who have seen the problem from the inside." Yasmin's eyes widened. "Me? I'm just a flight attendant." "There's no just about it," Crystal replied firmly. "You are exactly who needs to be heard." Meanwhile, in a federal holding facility, the new reality of Megan Parker's life was stark. Gone were the designer clothes, the practiced smile, the air of superiority. All that remained was an orange jumpsuit, the cold weight of her consequences, and the long road ahead. Her lawyer hadn't minced words. The video evidence was irrefutable, witness testimonies were damning, and her accomplice had chosen to cooperate with prosecutors. She was facing a minimum of 15 years in federal prison. The drug trafficking charges were severe enough, but the civil rights violations and false accusations had sealed her fate. 6 months later, Crystal Cole stood before a new audience. She was at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, in a room filled with 30 new air marshals and flight crews from across the industry, all part of a new joint security program. "What you're about to see," Crystal began, "has become a textbook case in how bias can be weaponized." On the screen behind her, the now infamous footage began to play. Megan surreptitiously planting the drugs in Crystal's bag. "The passenger targeted in this video was me," she said, her voice steady. "But I want you to consider how this story would have ended if I hadn't been a federal agent with a hidden camera. If I had just been an ordinary traveler." A heavy silence fell over the room as they contemplated that chilling reality. "Every day," Crystal continued, "people face assumptions and unfair treatment based on nothing more than how they look. Most of the time, there is no dramatic courtroom revelation, no ultimate justice. There is only the quiet, painful lesson that the world sees you differently." She clicked to the next slide. It was a mugshot of Megan Parker. Last week, Megan Parker was sentenced to 18 years for drug trafficking, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. Her co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. Crystal moved through her presentation, detailing how the smuggling operation worked, how racial profiling was used as both a tool and a cover, and how the investigation had uncovered similar schemes at 2 other airlines. "The lesson here isn't just about catching criminals," she explained. "It's about the systems that allow them to operate, the biases that make their schemes possible, and the silence of those who see something wrong but fail to speak up." Miles away, on another tarmac, Greatland Airways Flight 237 prepared for departure. In the first-class cabin, a young black man settled into his seat. The lead flight attendant, now a senior cabin crew manager, greeted him warmly. It was Yasmin Collins. "Welcome aboard, sir. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" It was a simple, unremarkable interaction, an act of normal courtesy. But it represented a small, seismic shift spreading through the industry. A change prompted by one incident that exposed not just a criminal ring, but a deeper sickness that had gone untreated for far too long. Back in her office at Langley later that week, a letter arrived for Crystal. It was from a flight attendant she'd never met, at an airline she hadn't investigated. "After your case went public," the letter read, "I started noticing things on my own flights. The small ways we treat different passengers, the assumptions we make. I've started speaking up now. It isn't always easy, but then I think about what happened to you and I find my voice. Thank you for changing more than just one airline." Crystal smiled, adding the letter to a growing file. Justice, she mused, wasn't always about putting criminals behind bars. Sometimes it was about changing the conversation itself. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many of us have seen something unfair and wished we had spoken up? Your voice matters more than you might think. As Crystal prepared for her next assignment, she knew one case wouldn't erase centuries of bias, but it had created an opening, a moment when people normally resistant to such conversations were finally, truly listening. And sometimes, that is where real change begins. In her final report on Operation Flight Risk, Crystal concluded with words that would eventually be inscribed on the wall of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Justice is not just about punishing wrongdoing. It is about creating systems where doing right becomes the easiest choice for everyone. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others, because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that allow us to see the world through another's eyes, if only for a moment. We'll see you in the next story.